Hey folks, Amanda here. Just a quick heads up that from time to time, the Survivor's Guide to Thriving podcast does include some adult language. So if you've got kids with you, you may just want to hold on to this episode to listen to a little later. Enjoy. Welcome back to the Survivor's Guide to Thriving podcast, the show for people who are ready to break out of survival mode in order to build a truly thriving life. I'm Amanda Solman, and along with Mark Jewell and the rest of my team here at Mark Jewell Speaking and Training, we break down common roadblocks that keep people stuck surviving and share ideas to help you thrive each and every day. All right, welcome back to another episode of the Survivor's Guide to Thriving. It is my pleasure to welcome back Wade Johannes to the show. Wade, nice to have you with us this week.
Hey, Amanda, how are you doing today?
I am doing it pretty well. I am excited to dig into a topic that you suggested, and I know you've been doing some work with some of our clients on. And so let's just jump right in, because I know we always have really good conversation when we're talking, and I want to make sure we got enough time to get all the good stuff in. So we are going to be talking about customer service. And so when you first threw this out to me, one of my first reactions was that I think the term customer service could mean a lot of things. And so I'm curious, what does it mean to you? And especially, what does it mean to you in the context of where you think it might help our clients?
Yeah, so my background started in as a customer, so as a farmer, and then I spent the bulk of my career working in ag retail for a multinational and then also for a local cooperative. And so I always went back to my own experience and looking at it from a customer experience. And when you look at it from the customer's perspective, I think it takes on a different meaning than simply customer service. I think the term customer service sounds very generic. It probably gets too broad of a brush, and people think, well, oh yeah, okay, I get it. But when you think about it from the customer experience, then all of a sudden it becomes more real and becomes more actionable. And I think that distinction is one that makes a big difference in terms of deliverables.
Yeah, I can see that. I guess as you were just talking about it now, I don't know why I didn't really think of this when I was writing the outline and everything, but as you were talking about it that way, I almost think like customer service, probably a lot of us have in our mind like a counter at a store or an auto dealership, right? You go to the customer service counter to get your questions answered, and so it becomes very transactional. Like, I come to you with a question, you answer it, versus what you're saying, right, is that the customer experience, it's more holistic, right? It's bigger than just answering questions. It is that experience from top to bottom. Is that fair?
Yeah, it's the distinction. It's not just a department that has an area of responsibility, the customer service department. It's everyone. So everybody from front desk to the applicator to the bookkeeper, everyone can make an impact from start to finish because they're all part of delivering on that overall customer experience. And when you shift that from something that one department is responsible for to we all have a role in this, you automatically get an increased ownership in what is delivered to that customer. And when you think about all of the different experiences that you have had as a customer when you are the customer, it's wide ranging. There are great experiences where, wow, that was actually enjoyable, or even, I look forward to interacting with that company or that person again. And then there are those other experiences where it's just like, oh my goodness, I couldn't wait to get out of there. You think of the DMV and what that experience is like. Well, there are organizations that are almost as cold as that experience. So how do we go about differentiating ourselves and delivering from top to bottom, from start to finish, a better experience that people look forward to being a part of?
So let's use that as a segue. When let's actually take it from what it might look like now. Okay, so we're going to talk about what makes a really good experience, but I almost want to maybe start on the other end of the spectrum and ask you, when individuals or when organizations are falling short in terms of creating that optimized customer experience, what is it that they're missing the mark on?
I think the biggest thing that we miss the mark on is we look at our job, whatever it is, as just getting a task done. And what is, in a lot of cases, what is the bare minimum that I have to do to keep my job or to keep getting paid? And while that is doing the said job, it also is not creating an environment, a culture that people want to be a part of. It's not enjoyable from the employee standpoint, and it's not enjoyable from the customer standpoint. And if you look at the research, and I don't have the numbers in front of me in terms of employee engagement, but when people are lit up, when they're using their strengths, as we teach at MJST, you get so much more out of the same people. And it's not just the return on investment on the bottom line. It's a culture that people want to be a part of, and they attract into their business the customers and the clients who also want to be a part of that.
Absolutely. I think one of the other things that organizations or individuals who maybe don't deliver the customer experience that they're capable of, part of it comes from the fact that maybe somebody somewhere along the lines has not done a very good job of setting expectations as to what that experience can or should look like. Where does that land with you, with kind of where you've seen things, or what role does expectations and being clear on those expectations come into play?
Well, I'm sure I use this on every single podcast we've ever recorded, but when I assume that somebody else understands, I lose. And so when you think about what 98% of onboarding processes look like, we hire somebody for a job, and we give them the keys to the truck or keys to location, and maybe we talk a little bit about it, but it's all just verbal. At best, it might be verbally spoken in terms of, yeah, if you can do this, that'd be great. If you can do this, that'd be great. But in a lot of cases, they get handed a new role, and we're not clear about, okay, what are all of the little pieces that go into this to make sure that this is a great experience for the end customer. And as we hire somebody, let's just say they've got 10 years of experience in this type of position with other organizations. Great. What does that have to do with what this experience is going to be like? Because, in what I have seen, not everyone wants to deliver on a great customer experience. There are organizations out there, that simply want to make the transaction and be as efficient at it as possible. Well, that's great. So if you want to differentiate yourself, how do you do it? What does that look like? What are the details that are involved in that we want to deliver on and do it consistently?
Yeah, it goes for pretty much anything else. If you want it to be done a certain way, we've got to be super clear about what that looks like. And then we've got to teach people how to do that. And so I think that sort of leads into this next question, which is, so if we know that there's room for improvement when it comes to improving that customer experience, what are some of the roadblocks that get in the way? So I hear there's a lack of clarity around what that looks like, but what might be some other things that get in the way of whether it's the organization as a whole or even just on an individual basis showing up and really delivering in a way that customer wants to come back for more?
Yeah. So in terms of clarity, it needs to be written down on paper. It needs to be very clear in terms of what are all of the minimum marks and how often do these need to be met. A checklist of these are the expectations, and then you layer in coaching. So when somebody gets started, maybe they start off and they're doing great, but then things get busy and things start to slide. Well, that's where coaching comes in, and we hold people accountable to reach, this is the minimum expectation right here. And so we keep bringing them back in to meet those expectations. And it becomes part of, I'm not saying every conversation, but it becomes part of a routine conversation. Are we meeting our expectations? And if not, what is getting in the way? And then we're coaching them on how to overcome those obstacles to make sure that we deliver consistently.
And I think to that point, that is one of the one of the obstacles, one of the roadblocks that organizations face in terms of crafting a really purposeful customer experience. Is even if we have outlined what we think it should look like, very rarely do we have that coaching and accountability to back it up, right? So they might once go through quote unquote customer service training, right? Or in their onboarding process, they might get their checklist of these are the things that you're supposed to do when you bring on a new customer, or this is how often you should be talking to your customers, or when you see them, you should always do these things, right? Like they might get that information once when they come on board, but very rarely do we come back and say 6 months later, how often are you having these conversations? Or very rarely, in a performance review, do we say, hey, on a scale of 1 to 10, how are we doing in these things that lead to a great customer service or great customer experience? And so I think that's right on the mark. Is for a lot of organizations, clarity is a problem, but even if you have clarity around what it should look like, that doesn't mean that it's always happening.
Right. We have, and let's just think of ag retail just as an example, or any business with multiple locations, and you have a location manager or a regional manager overseeing this area, and one does it extremely well and one does it so. Well, is it really the difference in the person, or is it just simply a difference in the understanding in terms of the expectations? Oh, we're still doing that? No, yes, we are. Absolutely. This is black and white. This is what we are doing. And these are the expectations on how often we are delivering on this.
Absolutely. I also think so. Sometimes it is right a training problem or a coaching and accountability problem. Um, Sometimes I think it is important though too to recognize what people's strengths are and where you have them slotted to best deliver on that, right? So if I've got a really customer facing person who just it's not their strength to deliver that sort of experience, maybe I do need to think about it differently in terms of where they best fit in my organization, or how do we adapt the expectations to better fit within that person's strength set or skill set. I think we've all been to a business where we've got, let's just say like we go to a restaurant for dinner and we get a waiter who is just like, oh, they should not be dealing with people, right? Like we've all experienced that. And so I think sometimes another roadblock on the list might be we don't match people up strength wise to the role we're asking them to do. And so making sure that we really take a deep look at our organization and where we've got people assigned. Because to go back to your example, right, I'd really hate for one customer to have a wonderful experience just because they happen to be in the geography of the really charismatic, customer oriented, location manager. And another person has this terrible opinion of your business just because they happen to be in a geography where they're not dealing with folks who are as suited to really deliver on that experience. I don't know. Maybe that's a tangent, and I don't know your thoughts on that, Wade. But I always get the impression like there is a personality piece to this.
Yes, there absolutely is. And so part of this is, the support from the organization. So if you think about, walking into an office space, and if one office is clean and well kept and, good signage on the wall and bright and, well lit. And the next one is dingy and dirty. And, okay, part of that is, are we empowering people to do something about it? I know a couple of situations where all it took was a coat of paint and a few light bulbs, and it completely changed the overall feel of a location. And the crazy part of it was the location manager didn't know that he had the authority to do that. And so, understanding, here's the expectation, here is what you have authority to make decisions over to reach this, and how you deliver on it. That's up to you. But, here is the minimum expectation. And then what are some wows that we can include in there that really put things over the top?
Yeah, having that flexibility is huge in that empowerment. Absolutely. Absolutely. We'll probably get here. So many things are coming to my mind as you're talking, because I just think about how important it is. That empowerment issue comes up a lot when it comes to solving customer problems, right? And the experience that a customer has can be highly dependent on how empowered that sales rep or that office manager or that location manager or that front desk person, how empowered they are to solve problems for people in the way they best see fit. So I think that could be a roadblock to providing a great customer experience, is if you don't, as a leader, empower your team to create the experience. I mean, I think there should be benchmarks, right? Like, there should be consistency across an organization, but there also should be some leeway to say that, man, if we see a way to just knock it out of the park and just make this customer feel awesome, even though that's over and above or outside of the checklist, like, do it. Like, make sure that customer wants to stay. I don't know. I think the empowerment thing is a big deal.
But also consistency in the message. So, okay, this is what we want, and we're going to support you in this. And here's where you're out of bounds. I mean, being clear about where you've overstepped, or, where you've gone too far. Because as organizations grow, there will be individuals, locations that do test the boundaries. So being firm on what those boundaries are. But if somebody does go above and beyond and wows a customer, not cutting their head off if they overspent by $150 or something like that. I mean, if there's a lot of different variables in this, obviously, but if I say customer service is important, then don't make examples of people when their expense budget is a little bit higher. Support them in that, as long as it falls within the parameters that were mentioned and that were discussed and clearly laid out before.
Absolutely. And I think that goes back to the coaching we were talking about earlier, right? So part of it is the expectations, right? I'm so glad you said that. Brought me back into reality a little bit. We can't be going crazy, but I like that example you have, because I think that's a really applicable example that people have, is, oh, well, I took care of this customer and I made sure they were okay, but I spent a little bit more, or I gave them a little bit more of a discount than maybe that I would have normally, or I did something, maybe I gave them some free product to make up for something, right? Like, I did something that maybe is not within, maybe the typical boundaries. And so I guess that's a good question for a manager to coach through, is like, where are those opportunities where you can go over and above and beyond to help a customer, and where are those opportunities where I say, hey, I see what you were doing, but let's go back a little bit to the bigger picture, and just remember that we can't always be doing that, because we won't, whatever, and so, yeah, I like that example, because I think that's something that people run into all the time.
Yeah. So you want to praise in public and, coach somebody when they do something that isn't quite right, coach them in private. And as simple as that sounds, we have to do better at doing that. I've seen way too many times where somebody is brought up in front of their peers and made an example of. And not only did they shut that person down, but guess what? Nobody else is going to try anything else for fear of that same thing happening to them.
Yep, and that's definitely the situation you want to avoid. So I think that's really important. We've kind of jumped all over the places, and I take full blame for having ideas come and pop into my head. But I wanna come back sort of to some of the questions that I'd had for you. And so talked about roadblocks that get in the way of good customer service or delivering good customer service. And so keeping those in mind, let's say I'm an employee, so I'm an individual, right? I might not be responsible for the entire organization's customer experience, but like me as an individual. So maybe I'm a sales rep, or maybe I am the person who answers the phone in the office when customers call in, or maybe I'm, running deliveries, or I could be in any number of roles. And I say, you know what, I probably could deliver a little better experience for my customers than I currently am. Where might you tell me to start?
Well, it starts by putting yourself in the customer's shoes and thinking of it from their perspective. What do you want them to experience? What do you want them to think? What do you want them to feel? What do you want them to say when they leave or when they get done? Um, and it's not just the individual, but it's also the environment. So, you know, when I walk into this location, what do I see? What does it look like? What am I hearing? Sorry to be a little gross, but what are you smelling? You know, there's a
Very
reason why.
realistic in animal agriculture. Yeah.
Yeah, there you go. But there's a reason why when you walk through the mall, why there's certain aromas that are pushed out into the crowd, because just smelling certain things makes you think of different things. And so, thinking of it from, all the different senses, and what do you want this to look like, feel like, smell like, uh, what do you want it to be from start to finish? And it's as simple as choosing the right attitude. So you talk about it from the individual employee perspective. What attitude do I choose? And we've all been in that experience where the person on the other side of the counter or the other side of the table couldn't care less if they got your business or not. And you know how awful that feels when you have to hand them that check. Whereas you also probably have been in an experience where we want our money to go to this person because we want them to do well. We want to see them succeed. We want to see them win. And what does that feel like? And so much of it comes back to the attitude that I choose and how I show up as an individual.
Absolutely. I mean, just thinking of what tone of voice do I show up with? What words do I choose to use? What is my body language? What am I wearing? Like, I mean, even things like that. So many of our people that we work with are actually going and visiting their customers at their place of business. And so if I show up, exhausted, grumpy, and looking like a slob like that, that doesn't communicate to my customer that I care much about them. So it's so much in those little details that you mentioned. Um, oh, go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, so a lot of our customers call on farmers. And when you think about a farmer, they're all entrepreneurs and, running their own business and signing, in a lot of cases, 6 or maybe even 7-figure checks. And there are certain people who, I feel good handing over this size check to. And then there are others that, you know what, you've got to work a little harder to earn this. And I don't mean that to sound judgmental, but I'm just being honest from the customer's perspective. Showing up and feeling worthy of earning this business is a huge piece of the battle in growing whatever business you're in.
Absolutely. And I think too, I want to speak a little bit to the people who maybe don't always feel as though they are in a customer facing role, or maybe they're not on the front lines. Maybe they're not that sales rep who's going out and talking to people, or maybe they don't necessarily own that relationship. So, as examples, right, we work with folks who do work in retail. So, they might be desk folks who answer the phones and do things at the computer. They might be people who, when someone comes into the store, they answer questions, or maybe they're out, out in the feed mill, or somewhere else out in the operation of the business. And I think it can be easy to sometimes say, well, I'm not responsible for customer service because I don't handle customers. That's a sales rep's job, right? Or that's the account manager's job. That's not my job, right? And so to go back to an earlier point you made, that the customer experience from top to bottom is everybody's responsibility. So you might not be the main owner of that customer relationship, but let's just say you're the feed mill manager, or you're running the scales when folks are bringing grain in the fall. Like, if you're not managing your department, like, that rolls downhill, right? Like, that is a snowball that will build, and it will impact the customer somewhere down the line, right? Or maybe you're answering the phone for questions, so you don't own the relationship, but I've heard from enough people, you sure as heck can break that relationship, right? Like, the number of I got to coach sales reps who are like, oh, customer came in and so at the front desk was mean to them, and now I got to go fix that problem, right? Like, even if you are not the sole owner, like, you have an impact on whether customers do business with your organization. And so just remembering that everybody is important and creating that customer experience, and everybody's important to the success of the organization in that way.
Yeah, I remember a couple of situations when I was calling on farmers myself. Um, one was very positive. We had somebody at the scale who was just bubbly and energetic and just so personable that the farmer couldn't wait to bring more grain back into that location. And this is at the same location. There was somebody else at the dump pit who was not in the same place, let's just say. And, I was told by my farmers that I don't care what you pay me, I am not bringing my grain to that person. And, an extreme example, but absolutely everybody from start to finish makes an impact. And it's about stepping up, taking ownership for my piece of the overall puzzle. And because this piece is going to be the best of the whole bunch.
Absolutely. Before I ask you the other side of this, so we're talking about the individual, and I want to get to leaders and organizations at a higher level in terms of customer experience. But I also, before we move on from the individual side of the world, I just want to put in a little plug that, so we just talked, right, about the people who aren't always like directly customer facing. For those of you who are directly customer facing, I just want to put in a little plug to remember that you're not the only one who owns that relationship. So part of the customer experience has to be you letting go of the reins a little bit and allowing your teammates to also support that customer in the best way possible. So I see sometimes sales reps in particular, or account managers in particular, people who have very strong customer responsibilities, who want to just own that relationship so tightly that, number one, they put too much on their plate that could be delegated or could fall in the wheelhouse of someone else. They don't ask for help when they need it. They don't ask for feedback. Like, it can create some challenges in some other arenas. And then what happens is, maybe that sales rep goes on vacation and no one else in the organization can help that customer because they didn't release the reins. And so now what's happening to that customer experience? Or maybe that sales rep takes a new job, right? I've heard of situations where somebody held onto a relationship so tightly, then took a new position. That organization couldn't hold on to that customer relationship because they had no background, no context, because that sales rep just held on to the reins too tightly. So remember that if you are super customer facing, it kind of caveats what we were just talking about. Like, you have to let that customer have a good experience with everyone in your organization, not just you, because that's what allows that business relationship, that partnership with the customer to be sustainable, even when you maybe move up in the organization or out of the organization at some point. That's really important too.
Yeah, and when you think about your individual organization or as your overall business, you can have control or you can have growth, but you can't have both. And a big part of this, and this is something that we coach our clients on, if you are the sales rep and your customer tells you, oh yeah, your delivery driver did a great job, and really appreciate how they cleaned up after themselves before they left, and it actually looks better by the tank than when they first got here. Make sure we're sharing those wins, we're celebrating those wins. And because if I'm the delivery driver, I'm probably not hearing much of that. So the more we can celebrate those wins, the more we're going to accelerate those, and we're going to see more of them.
Absolutely. So let's use that as a segue. So we've talked about, okay, me as an individual, whether I'm super customer facing or just sort of tangentially customer facing, what I can do to sort of improve that customer experience. But let's take it up to a higher level. If you are a leader in an organization and you're trying to shift your culture around customer service and creating a better customer experience, what should you be thinking about?
Well, as a leader, it starts with me. And I need to make sure that I'm modeling the right behaviors and that I'm not just saying these things and then doing something else. If you look around, we see way too much of that, where the core values are just lip service. Yeah, this is who we are, but then we're going to do these other things to make our bottom line. Um, that needs to stop. We need to be authentic and be true to ourselves. Okay. But then we talked about clarity. So what are those expectations? And, if you think about a great organization in terms of customer service or customer experience, Chick-fil-A comes to mind quite often. And I just did a quick Google search, and they have over 2,200 locations now. And that is the feedback, from one side of the company to the other. Well, how do they do that? Well, it starts with clarity around expectations, and that becomes baked into the cake of what is delivered at each level. So if I'm, taking the order, this is what it looks like. If I am, back in the kitchen, this is what this looks like. And, it goes all the way to, if I walk into this restroom at this location or this restroom at this other location, they look very similar. Well, why is that? Because it's baked into the cake. It's part of the culture. This is who we are. And we have checklists for everything, and then coach people, hold people accountable to follow through on those details, because those details are who we are.
And just as a selfish plug, if Chick-fil-A wants to grow that 2,200 by a few locations, I know a part of Michigan that doesn't have a Chick-fil-A that would welcome it wholeheartedly. Oh
And I
man.
know somebody else who would like to help with the customer service training. So there you
Uh,
go.
sounds good. Sounds good. All right. Yeah, good deal. So, yeah, setting that clarity and coaching and accountability is absolutely critical.
But think of 2,200 locations, and how did they make something that was done very well at one location scalable to 2,200? When we're working with ag retail and they've got 50 locations, and they're saying, well, yeah, we've got a good location manager here and a not so good one over here. Bullshit. I mean, this is more than just simply who is the manager. This is part of the culture and part of the clarity and coaching. And this is who we are. So I don't buy into the BS on it comes down to the people. No, it comes down to the organization.
And it also comes down to what are your standards and what are you willing to settle for, right? So if I say like an excellent customer experience is that is a non-negotiable, then that impacts my training, it impacts my coaching, it impacts the accountability that I have, and it impacts my hiring. Like I won't hire people who can't deliver or won't deliver an excellent customer service. And I know I get like that can be challenging in some parts. Like I want to be realistic. Oh, Wade's gonna argue with me. So here, let me finish where I was going, and then I want you to argue with me. I see you shaking your head. I like it. So I feel like sometimes, especially when we're out in very rural areas where there's just not as many people. So it makes our hiring pools, our talent pools, a little smaller, and so sometimes I think people. And it might be an excuse, and so that probably is where you're going. But I think sometimes we can say like, I don't have that many people to choose from and I need somebody to manage that location. So I hired the best person of the people I had, and that may or may not be the right person. So I don't know, like that was my thought, but now I want to know why you were shaking your head, and I want to have you argue with me on that cuz I'm not totally bought into my own explanation there, but now I really want to hear your side.
Okay. It might take more time to fill a certain position, but Tony Robbins says if you don't like your results, raise your standards. And I think I know way too often we fill a spot to fill a spot rather than wait for the right person who's going to deliver on our expectations consistently for the long term. And yeah, I mean, if you don't like the results you're getting, raise your standards.
Yeah, it didn't take much for you to convince me that that's the actual right answer to what I was saying.
Wait, does that mean that I won?
You definitely won on that
Yes.
one. And honestly, I mean, it's funny because I sort of told my explanation, but I truly believe that every time you hire someone under pressure, maybe not every time, but a huge percentage of the time, if you hire somebody under pressure or you don't take your time in hiring someone just because you feel like you need somebody in the seat, you will regret it later. Like, there's just too many examples of that being the case to not be very purposeful and intentional about who you hire into certain roles.
Absolutely. And then when you do get the right person in, you're going to be that much more intentional in training them, coaching them, making sure that they succeed rather than rushing somebody in to fill the spot. You know, um, yeah, you're going to pay for that in spades over the long run. But I do want to make a note. We're recording this January 4th, 2019. This is the first time I beat Amanda in a debate. So I'm going to put that on my calendar, put a little star next to it. That's a big day for Wade Johannes.
I don't know. I don't know how to take that. Like I'm not sure. I'm just gonna let it sit because I don't know how to take that.
You're very good at what you do, Amanda. That's all I'm
Oh,
saying.
geez. Well, thanks. Okay, so kind of thinking though about um, digging deeper into this example from Chick-fil-A and scaling it to maybe some of the people we work with, or just, folks who might be listening to this who we don't work with, who might be wondering how they can improve their customer experience. So let's say you're a manager and you're coaching your people. Maybe your senior leadership has done a pretty good job of outlining, here's what we expect, here's what it looks like, here's your checklist, here's your boundaries. Now, how do I as a manager coach my people on the ground to make sure that I'm delivering on that? We've said multiple times, coaching and accountability is important. So, give me some specifics, Wade. If I was sitting on this side from a coaching call with you, how would you coach me through that to support my team?
Okay, so and this goes back to leadership, but taking time to teach the why. Why does this matter? When an employee hears, hey, we're going to have customer service training, it's real easy to, that just sounds like more work, more stuff that I have to do. And so really dig into why does this matter? And, when you think about, why does your organization exist? I asked several different leaders that same exact question. Why does your organization exist? And it's amazing the responses, or actually the lack of responses that you get, because no one's ever really thought of it before. We talk about our P&L, we talk about growing our business, but what's the why? Why do we exist as an organization? And when you really dig down, in most cases, it's because this is my livelihood. This is my family's livelihood. This is our community's livelihood. And it doesn't matter if you're an ag producer or you're, a manufacturer, whoever. What's the why? And if you can dig into why this stuff matters, then all of a sudden we can start to understand, okay, then we start gaining buy-in that we're not just giving you more stuff to do, but this is in your best interest to be a part of and take ownership in. And then make sure that, coaching, and this just comes from us having the benefit of coaching hundreds of people every year. But coaching is not pointing out what's wrong. It's asking questions and helping people to find the answer instead of us pointing out where they screwed up or what isn't meeting expectations. It takes longer up front, but in the long run, you're going to have a much more engaged, empowered employee when you coach them to reach for themselves instead of just being criticized and critiqued every time that they miss the mark.
Absolutely. And one thing I just want to reiterate in that aspect of coaching in terms of asking good questions, I think the other thing that managers can do is, and it kind of goes back to what we were talking about earlier, but really recognize the strengths of each individual. So some people might create an amazing customer experience because of the depth of knowledge that they can bring to that customer relationship, right? Like that customer says, I just want to work with that organization because their people are like tip top experts in this area, right? And so that might be the strength of one person or one department, whereas another person might create just an amazing customer experience because they really are all about developing relationships and getting to know those people. And so that customer says, man, I just really want to work with them because I feel like they know me. They know what I care about. They know the problems I've got to solve, right? And so you as a manager might not coach those same people in terms of the customer experience the same way. Like again, there's non-negotiables, there's boundaries, there's checklists. Like I totally get it from an organizational standpoint, but also recognize that the specifics of how someone might show up and deliver that customer experience are very much based on an individual's strengths and an individual's skill set.
Yeah, that's why management is so challenging, why everybody has room to grow, because you've got all of these different expectations, in terms of what you're going to do. And then all these individuals are all different. And so taking all of these different variables and knowing how and when to apply them and how to coach each individual up according to their strengths and according to expectations. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of complexity to how you deliver on that, and that's in my opinion, the biggest reason why we have so much room to improve in terms of management in any industry at any level.
Absolutely. It's the thing that makes it most challenging, but also the thing that makes it kind of exciting and fun as well, is trying to figure out each individual's kind of what are their buttons? How do you get the dials tuned in just right to get that person both the optimal level of personal fulfillment, but also the optimal level of output for the organization.
Yeah, if everybody was the same, it'd be it'd be very boring.
Very boring.
Everybody needs the same 2 minute pep talk in order to deliver on this. It's going to get very old very quick.
Absolutely. So wait, I'm going to ask you one more question on this, and then I just got a couple of wrap up questions for you. But we've talked about a lot. We've kind of, I will take the blame, kind of went down a couple of rabbit holes just because some cool thought popped into my head, or at least I hope it was cool. But as you kind of look at this conversation as a whole, what is maybe one or two pieces of advice when it comes to improving customer service that you would give if you were, consulting or giving advice to an organization on this?
Yeah, I would say, the biggest thing is who are you? And what do you want to be known as? And um, as simple as that sounds, if you asked an executive team of 10 people, you'd probably have at least 7 different answers. And so if we don't have the same answer to who we are and what we're about, how can we expect people on the front line to be able to do the same?
Awesome. Awesome. So as we kind of wind down here, I am asking everybody a new question here this year. And so that question is, Wade, separate from anything else we've talked about, what's going on in your life right now that you're super excited about?
Yeah, so I've I've actually been thinking about this for a while. And part of it was how busy the fourth quarter of 2018 was for us, um, in terms of my schedule and just everything that we were delivering on in terms of coaching. But I decided that I need to block off time to work on myself. And so for one day a month, I'm going to block off time to read, to journal, to meditate, and just think about different things. And so for 2019, just blocking off time and protecting that time with your help. And no, it's mainly on me. I just, and it's all over LinkedIn right now, but it's a video between Bill Gates, Warren Buffett, and they're being interviewed. And Bill Gates talks about how Warren Buffett, if you look at his calendar, there's like 3 appointments in an entire week. And Bill Gates is talking about how, as a CEO, busy is not the goal. And everybody wants a piece of your time. And you have to protect your time in order to be able to transcend and move forward as an individual and as an organization. So that's what I'm doing for myself, and want to be able to deliver on even more for our clients and for MJST. So that's what I'm really excited about for 2019.
Cool. I'm excited to hear how that goes for you and how you find it helpful. I know probably a couple months ago I transitioned to moving to once a week where I block off a day as a no meetings day. Not necessarily for self work like you're doing, but just so that I can actually do some more strategic work versus just putting out fires. And I know that's really helped me. And so I'm excited to hear how your one day a month for self growth and investing in your own abilities, how you find that.
Yeah, and one other thing I'll just say is this is very this is 180 degrees from how I was raised. And growing up on a farm and on a feedlot, there was always more work to be done. And so, if you had an hour, it was, okay, how can we get the most of that hour? And it was busy, 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 and do more, more, more. And as I maybe, grow up a little bit, I realized there's always more work to be done. And so that's a big part of this, is to shift from doing into stepping back and allowing things to happen as the right time comes.
So that, any final thoughts, Wade?
Well, in terms of the customer experience, just understand it starts with me as an individual and the attitude that I choose to show up as. We talk about at MJST, we talk about showing up as our best selves and having that daily mindset that what am I going to do to be my very best today? And tomorrow, how can I be better than I am today? So just taking ownership, and it starts with me. And then finally, just realizing that anyone at any level of any organization can make a difference. And that's the thing that really gets me excited, when somebody who maybe seemingly has an insignificant role, but when they do it exceptionally well. And that's what really lights me up, because that's just really cool. Somebody taking pride in what they're doing, regardless of what the task is. And that's what everybody wants to be a part of.
I know I do. Awesome. Well, Wade, thank you for coming on the show today, and I know you will be back, so we will see you the next time.
Sounds great, Amanda. Look forward to it.
Thanks for tuning in to this week's episode. If you like what you heard, make sure to jump over to Apple Podcasts and leave us a rating and review. We appreciate the feedback, and it helps other people find the show. On that same note, if you enjoyed this episode, make sure to share it with a friend. As always, if you're looking for more resources to go from surviving to thriving, check out our website at www.markjeweltraining.com. That's Jewel with 2 L's. And you can find us under Mark Jewel Speaking and Training on all the major social networks. Remember, survival is dead. It's your time to thrive today. See you next week.